Hello, audience. Welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are creative conversations with visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. Myself and the guests, we do 20 minutes of shop talk, getting deep dive into filmmaking, acting, producing, things, whatever they seem to be doing. And 20 minutes of answering questions from you guys, the global audience. I see you guys are already writing in. Please write in. We will try to get to you and get you the answers and information you need. I'm Liz Hinlein. I'm a filmmaker and creative director at New York Film Academy. And I am so excited to have an amazing director slash DP, Jordan Haro, to visit with us today and drop some knowledge. So now, oh my God, it worked. There you go.
How's it
Hello,
going?
Jordan. So great to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you for having me.
It's funny, audience. Jordan and I were just getting into a discussion about how he was renting an Airstream and starting to make a film with his partner coming across the country during the pandemic, which seemed like only something that a very experienced, either a very experienced filmmaker would be doing or someone who is totally naive and had no experience doing, because it's quite an undertaking. And just would love, because it sounds creative but troublesome, how did give me some insight into how that, what was your guys' plan and then what really happened?
Yeah, we rented one Airstream trailer back, I think it was June of the pandemic, or we're still in the pandemic, but 2020. So
Mm-hmm.
when we were just coming out of the lockdown phase, when we were all in our heads the most. And that actually was a great trip, had a great time. It sold us on buying one. And so they were impossible to find. So we went all the way to New Orleans, or sorry, to like south of Lafayette, Louisiana. And it just so happened that a hurricane bore down on us, like basically at the same time, like as this deal was going to happen. And yeah, like what started as basically us just filming each other and the excitement about we're gonna buy this like little home that is gonna be ours, and like who needs a real home? We can just have this mobile home, and this is a new phase of our lives. And yeah, like starting with that hurricane that we like barely got out of the way of, um, it just became, as we like to say, it was like a tour of climate change across the country where we hit like crazy electric storms going, like lightning storms in Oklahoma, um, horrible heat wave in Utah that the next day turned into an ice storm in August, mind you. And then we got like kind of stuck in Colorado for 2.5 weeks as we were waiting to return to California because they were having their fires. So we kind of felt like we were climate refugees, and but by our own choosing, and
Right, right.
it
No one was paying you for this.
no, we were paying for it. And so we were filming this kind of like everything falling apart a little bit. And my fiance and I, we've been a little scared to like fully make this into the film it needs to be, but we filmed it all. And we also sold the Airstream at the end, like right when we got back to California. So there's something there, but it was intersecting with real life in a way that was a little heavy.
So was it, because you've been on the other side of being the filmmaker for so long with filming other people. And wanted to ask you, I was curious, what started first? Because you're a director and a camera person. So what was first for you?
Um, I don't, I think, I mean, I guess in a way, a camera person because I like touched a camera first before I knew anything about what the titles were, like what these roles are. Um, I would not call myself today like, oh, I'm like a working DP. Like I've done that kind of thing, and I love cameras for sure, but I feel like to me that was my gateway of like, I always like taking still pictures as a kid and whatever. We always had a still camera, not a video camera. So that was like my gateway into filmmaking for sure.
Definitely. Well, I want to show, because your work is really skillful and very sensitive. And so let's, Charlie, let's show the reel, and then I have some questions for you. So we'll do that.
Norm Macdonald has one of my favorite jokes of all time. He says, you don't realize it, but almost all your intelligence is in your front two teeth. And if you take out your front two teeth, you could say the smartest thing in the world and no one would listen to you. You could have the cure for cancer, but if you're missing these two teeth, not listen to this guy. That's what it kind of was like being black in 1950.
So we put him in it. The voice cast of Archer is the greatest working voice cast in the history of television, due in no small part to my participation.
Like, we aren't these people, but we also weirdly kind of are.
Except for myself and Chris Parnell, I think everybody's totally fine. When I was much younger, I used to go into spaces like this by myself on my own time and just play like one note for an hour. Just whatever note made the rafters sing, I'd search for that note and then I would play it for an hour, just getting it to resonate body. I've always been fascinated by that sympathetic resonance.
Cannot understand how powerful it is to be surrounded by your own people, and we are all living in our greatness. Oh my God, I'm having a serious mind right now. I was just trying to get through a moment. I was so afraid. I didn't allow myself to feel. And when I came here, I was being asked to feel. This is really incredible. Thank John. Thank John. Thank you, John.
Oh, very, very nice. Very nice. What I love about your work is you have this poetic realism. Um, so it is realistic, but there's a beautiful, just your imagery has a lot of depth and poetry. And especially that Greg Allman piece. I want to hear about that because I just think you really captured between the cast, whoever that is, and the styling and the vibe and the look.
That's very kind of you. Yeah, so that particular piece, I actually produced that piece. The director, Erica Silverman, I was working with her on a few music videos, and she and her DP are incredibly gifted at like that anamorphic style vibe. So I cannot take credit for like making that happen, but it was a pleasure to work with them because like, yeah, I look at that stuff, I'm like, yes, this is great. And I was very happy I was happy to produce that kind of stuff because for me, it was like, as a filmmaker, like I grew up kind of always being like, oh, you could just do everything. Like I grew up in Austin, Texas. Robert Rodriguez is like the hero there. I would read his book, about like just do it, like with no money. And so like for me, yeah, like that experience was kind of special from a standpoint of like I saw it as like a learning opportunity to work with other people using a skill set I do have of like, okay, I can produce this little like 2-day shoot or whatever it was. And yeah, it was fun and educational at the same time.
Well, so now, do you go, are there certain projects you look for? Or do you guys, because I know there's you as the filmmaker and you as the production company or
Right.
your production company. And so how do you, there's being, filmmaker with craft, but then there's also the business of this as well. And how do you slide between these?
That's a great question. And I'm still figuring that out. And I think the main thing that I do is there's like certain periods where I will just be really busy with work that, for lack of a better term, pays the bills. And then I will be with phases of like, okay, now what do I want to do? And being able to, in order to blend that, because not all the time, like, yeah, those things that I want to do are not like lucrative. Like they're literally just like something I'm doing with like myself or maybe 2 other people, but and are fun. But the blending I think comes through like, I'm very lucky that so some of that work that you saw in there, probably my favorite thing in there is this press tour that I was able to go on with this TV show called Snowfall on FX. And just like I've been working with them for now 4 seasons of like doing the behind the scenes stuff, to where like how many times can we just talk about like how the makeup is cool, and it allows me to be like, what if we did this? And luckily the client is super cool from a standpoint of they're always willing to try it. So that for me is an opportunity to like try something out that I'm curious about personally.
Give me an example of that. Like what from say Snowfall, what would be an example that you suggested?
Yeah. So I mean that press tour thing, like that's literally them, just the cast of the show will be paraded around to like several different major cities. They'll just show a theater, they'll pack a theater, show an episode of the first episode of the season, and drum up some hype and have some journalists there. It's super boring. Like there's no drama there. And it just so happened that they're like, hey, like we're thinking of just having you film it. Like could be good to get some content. Like we don't really know for what, but we just go out there and whatever. And literally it was like, well, wait, what? I don't know where to begin. Like, this is crazy. I mean, yeah, I could just film a red carpet, but there has to be more. And so as I went, it occurred to me, oh, all of these actors have like some significant part of their being in each of these cities, like whether they were born in like, we went to Atlanta, there was, and one of the actors was from there. We went to his family's home and like went to his grandma's house and like went and did all, like, this is where I love to eat, like this is my favorite chicken spot in the whole city, like all this really intimate stuff that then slowly, like a domino effect with each of the cast members, were like, oh, that's cool, like he got to do that with
Right,
parents.
right,
I'm going to show you, I went to Howard University, let me show you this.
right.
And there was just so much, like, it was just documentary storytelling where there's just spontaneous, cool, beautiful, serendipitous stuff that came up, that like that actress Michael Hyatt, like she just started crying because she was so overwhelmed with a lot of stuff that she hadn't visited ever since there, that like made her who she was. And like that was so cool.
That's great. That's great. And also the fact that then as a filmmaker, you're sort of owning it because your work doesn't feel formulaic. It does not feel like, and now we're going to do the sit down interview, and now we're going to do the thing here. And I noticed that we talked before, I said your eye lines where you're placing the camera is really more evocative.
Thanks.
And just on the creative craft question, you mentioned to me that, you know, you like having your audience have an emotion, whether they're laughing or crying. And how, as you know, being a filmmaker is like a bit of a magician, how do you sort of gear, okay, we have to do this sequence, we're going to someone's house, how can I find the emotion? What goes through your mind? Like, what do I need to do? My checklist in a way.
Yeah, I think it's just about, it's like impossible to force stuff, you know? I found it that there's just kind of it, and I think that's maybe why like documentary storytelling or whatever has just become a bit more secondhand, or not secondhand, second nature for me. Whereas when you come in with these intentions, where like I think it's possible to hold an intention of like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna like get that emotion, I'm gonna capture that in a bottle or something, but that's pretty hard. Like, and I think if you just think about that, it probably won't happen. For me, it just takes like really good conversation with someone. It takes just asking the right kind of questions. I feel like something that's helped me a lot is just knowing like what is in the question I'm asking, and like how a certain word may be like, I don't know, like whenever I've listened back at like earlier points of like an interview and I'm just saying like, so how did you do like like how, like these kind of questions maybe are a little more shallow, whereas like why, or just using certain word choices that will like really make them think, and also allowing them to have space. Like if they just want to keep talking about something, like cool, let them talk, and then just kind of not change the conversation around too much, just kind of letting it be whatever it's going to be.
Exactly. Now, and you can see that in sort of in even the short clips that you have. There's a bunch of questions here, and it's funny because a bunch of these questions are about networking, because I think people are thinking that you got it going on, which you do. So Margot asks, what is your advice on making contacts in the industry?
Okay. I think just not being afraid. Like, even again, I love that bit within in the video clip you just played with in Snowfall, where she's hugging, like they're all like hugging random people that came to the screening, and like all those people were asking the same question, like how do I like meet people, like how do I talk to people, and they're like, you're doing it right now and it's okay. And I think, and just I feel like the biggest thing, and I know I did this a lot when I was pretty young, was I would just love to meet people, um, kind of for the sake of like, oh, I'm networking. I'm doing this thing
Mhm.
without really knowing what or why. And like, yeah, okay, they're a filmmaker, cool, that's great. Like, oh, they're a writer, that's great. But um I don't know, oftentimes I would overlook, I think, the same thing we were just talking about with like making a good interview happen or making a good like emotional day on set happen, is just paying attention to the nuances of like, how are we connecting, what are we connecting about, um and just kind of taking it from there. And I think everybody, no matter what industry they're in, kind of responds well to chatting about like, I don't know, like finding common ground over something that
100%. Exactly. And I think the word networking is always so intimidating itself,
yeah,
whereas connection, common ground, is a much softer, gentler, as if networking is like you're going to get a result from that one conversation.
totally. I will share one thing. I hated film school. I never graduated. Thank you for having me on this for a film school, but I definitely did not complete my curriculum at my film schools. But I remember one of the best things that a particular teacher in my producing major um told me, and it was like I think our midterm was, he had us, we could just pick any producer and interview them, much like what you're doing right now, or
Mhm.
maybe not in this well, this was a long time ago, so Zoom did not exist, but just to interview them and write a long paper about the interview and like what that was, and basically left it open to that. And it was funny because in this large classroom of kids, all these people reached out to these like pretty major people, and they were all pretty down to chat because all of them love to talk about themselves.
Mhm.
And it was kind of crazy because it was showing like, look at how easy this is to like basically network in a way. Like you're
Right.
meeting people, but you're doing it through the lens of like just asking them to talk about themselves for your paper.
Right. There is something with the stroking of ego that you're getting a whole term paper written about you that seems like people would dig.
Yeah,
That's interesting. And who did you end up interviewing?
it's really funny. I got really close to getting Pete Berg, um,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time I thought was like the coolest. And I mean, he seems like an awesome guy. It all like fell apart at the last second. Um, and oh man, I'm blanking on his name, but he was the director and producer of the documentary Cocaine Cowboys,
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of other documentaries, like a ESPN doc about Miami's football program in the late 80s, I think. And just, yeah, like I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't like a backup thing. It was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, and it's no less like, it doesn't have to be a big name. Like, this is still as rich as it could be.
And so like say in that part with, does you and your company, do you go after work, or do you solicit, or are you just on the receiving end? How has that been functioning for you?
Yeah, it's a tough thing because I feel like what myself and my company, Homecourt Pictures, like we've been operating in this space of like special projects. Like even I've been seeing that term around like at different companies, like, oh, this is like a special project, which my interpretation of that, I think at a literal sense, is it's not like, here's the 30-second commercial, here's the 60, here's the like anthem, like this sort of like, here's the cookie cutter thing, which granted, like that is like for commercial production companies, like such a thing, right? Like they've done work with this brand, they've done work with that brand. Oh man, like, and that's that's a big, like if you're able to show that and get work, that's amazing. I've always had to kind of go around a different way of using my own documentary projects, my own passion things of how I spend my time, and then show them to people that are just curious of like, yeah, we want to do something kind of different, or like we're looking for a filmmaker to do this, maybe not like go to an ad agency and like do that whole thing. So I don't know the answer to your question, because it's always like, yeah, I'd love more work, I'd always love to do this, but in that it just requires it's always like a building over time, I would say, and letting my work speak for itself, and just working with the clients that I have right now and love, and yeah, just kind of letting it be as organic as possible.
Right, and letting it find you,
Yeah.
opposed to pinpointing it out.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of long questions here. So Leah asks, how much freedom and sense of creativity do you have, like with, like, say, with your Snowfall job? Are you sort of given with these special projects? Do you come back and pitch? Do they like, just start filming, show us what you got? Or
When I first started, I thought it was going to be pretty rigid or something. Like I was like, oh, I guess I need to be drawing up like decks, or, you know, doing this whole thing. And it's never been necessary. Like right now, I would say it's at a point of like, there's kind of a common sense of like, okay, there's this clear need for this, like, these few things have to happen. Like, there's no way around it. Like, we have to have a piece that's about X, Y, and Z. But then the stuff that is left to my interpretation, like, I had this idea, like I got in touch with these LA area Crip gang members, and who do this softball league here in LA for their members of all ages, to kind of foster peace amongst all of their different communities around town, which, like, believe it or not, like a softball league like is just so far into something that like it's so far down the line of, it's like a luxury to them. Like, this is not something that exists in their communities, to just go out to a park all together and hang out and grill and have a beer and like watch each other play softball. And just that act of doing it and everybody getting along and talking has like diffused violence in ways that are kind of like, it's unimaginable how much good this has done. And it's funny because, like, yeah, my work with this show on FX that's like retelling about the 80s crack epidemic kind of led to that. And I started filming a bunch of stuff with that. And it was kind of, it led me to like make some really cool stuff that I was very happy that they said, we love what this is, and this is incredible. You should put this out for yourself. Like, this is too much of a documentary. Like, this is too wonderful, and that's all good. Like, it was told with like, okay, cool, thank you. And we just did something else that I thought of too. And that felt great. That was like a nice feeling of like, even though that they didn't put it out, like they still helped it get made, and wonderful.
And that sounds like a wonderful project. Where is that at now?
I'm editing it right now. It's currently at like a 4-minute super fast cut, and I'm gonna try to build it out a little more. But yeah,
that's great.
TBD, be this summer.
TBD, tune in soon. We'll see what's going on with that. I've got a question. This is an interesting question from Jennifer. As what are habits you have that help with your creativity and your production?
It's a good question. I feel like just reading books on the topic, or I don't know, just reading in general.
It's good.
I will say, I'm just regurgitating what much smarter people than me said, but I remember going to like a Werner Herzog Q&A, and I think he does this a lot, where he'll like, someone will ask like, what's the one thing that you could tell a filmmaker? And he just said like, read, read, read. And he kept saying it for like a whole minute. Like, and I think at 20 seconds, like everyone's laughing, like, oh, this is so funny. And then at like 40 seconds, people are like freaked out and like thinking he's having like a stroke or something, because he's still just repeating the word. And after like a minute 20, he's like silent. And it's a very unorthodox way of explaining, I think, a true point that like, yeah, whether you're reading to brush up on a topic you need to be more familiar with that you're not, that's great. If you're reading a book to like, I don't know, like I just read a couple Harry Potter books and I was like, man, this is fun, you know, and that's good. It doesn't always have to be a Tolstoy novel or whatever. I think it all is good for you. It's like eating vegetables.
Or even better.
Yeah, maybe better.
Or maybe cake too at the same time.
Yeah.
And so now into the tech question. So this is probably a more specific answer. What gear do you recommend for documentary filmmaking?
Oh, Sony, hands down. Yeah, I love the Sony, everything, like the Sony cinema line that they've come out with. It's funny because I remember I made this documentary a while ago, and one of the stipulations was like all the deliverables had to be in 4K, which in like 2014 it was like, oh, okay, like that's a thing. Like, what are the options? And for keeping the budget tight and doing it in line with that, like the FS7 was the logical choice. And from there, just by how well that camera worked and how familiar I became with their other cameras, and then like I've since been in touch with the people that work for Sony, and they do such a great job of like listening to what people want in the documentary space, of like, how can we get the low light as correct as we can, like not only just exposing it, but like just giving you the flexibility, you know, or like the autofocus now, like there's all these tools that are just like ridiculous, especially when I think back about like when I started having to sync audio to like mini DV tapes, you know, and just how crazy that was. And I can't even imagine doing that like for on actual like 35 millimeter or 16. But yeah, they're just, I think, head and shoulders above anybody else. And they've got a camera for everybody, for sure, for any budget level.
Yeah, and they're very, they're very responsive, as you're saying, to like questions or feedback, or keeping up with the needs of the filmmaker, and especially the autofocus and low light and all the things, fast lenses, lightweight, but having professional dials on them as well.
Yeah, like I'm sure there's a million ways, and like in hindsight, one day we'll all be looking at like the way we look at like a Pentax stills camera, or these ways that are like, oh, that little thing is now worth all this money because it has like this way, or even like an iPhone is a tool, and it's all a tool. And I think Sony just does the best job of like, if you remove the kind of like it becomes less about the specs, I think, now, because everything is high resolution, everything can expose, and everything is just, and it's almost like just having like a MacBook Pro. I feel like okay, yeah, you've got the tools, you can just shoot a thing. Like for documentary camera, or for documentary filmmaking, that's I think, the best you could ask for a camera.
100%. And are you of the school of owning equipment or of renting?
I think it depends. Like, yeah, obviously, I think the there's a lot of it's been well documented that renting is probably going to be better for your like commercials, for your music videos, like whatever. But in some cases, like especially for documentary filmmaking, like I've done the thing where it's like, oh, that interview is coming up, gotta go rent all the stuff. That cannot, like, I've had experiences where I'm like, wow, I'm literally spending more money renting. You know, it's kind of like buying a house. It's like, are you just going to stay in the same place? Or do you need, like, that's maybe a bad analogy, but I do think that in certain instances, owning like a really solid camera that's going to always work for you, if you need it, is 100% worth it.
I totally agree, because also you're not, you don't know when that call's going to come and be, or the interview comes up, or you're have to run out and go get something.
Exactly.
And also the more time spent with the piece of equipment, and I like it, you akin it to a MacBook Pro. The more you spend with it, it's just part of your being, part of your kit. It's not.
Yeah, and one thing too, I would say it's also an asset. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in the world of documentary filmmaking, like, and I know people say this about like college or whatever, film school, about like, oh, like I had the one thing and that guy had the sound things and they could form like Voltron and like they could fuse together and shoot their film. Like it still exists as whatever age, like you can say to a friend, like, I've got this camera, can you do something for free for me? You can use this camera for free on the next thing. And like, that's helpful, So I think if you can like create equity for your community too, that's all the better.
That's really great. Sadly, we're coming to the end of our fun time together. Jordan, I always ask my guests, if you weren't doing filmmaking stuff, what would you be interested in doing?
Oh, I would probably, well, the dream would be to be a radio DJ.
Why
I
is that?
love that. I'm obsessed with music. I'm obsessed with researching who the artists are. I'm obsessed with discovering new artists. I'm always devouring, like, I don't know, like it's like an endless pit for me. And I love making mixtapes. I love making playlists. It's just an endless thing that I already kind of do it. I just am not on the radio.
Right.
So maybe one day.
You're not professing your love to a large audience at this point.
Actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, I started like a radio podcast of like what basically just making a radio show. And I immediately got yanked off SoundCloud because I have to license music, I guess. Surprise. It's a real thing, but
Funny. Where can people, if they want to ask you a question without pestering you, but where can people find you, your IG or stuff like that?
Yeah, Instagram is great. It's just at Jordan Haro. I think somebody took the spelling of my name, so I have a 0 instead of an O as the last letter. So Jordan HAR0.
Okay, fantastic. And then if they want to look at your company site, what's that?
So my company is Homecourt Pictures, and probably the best. I have a website, homecourtpictures.com. There's also Instagram. I'm never as good at the multiple Instagrams as I should be, but the website's perfect.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really so great to get to know you and do some shop talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, New York Film Academy, for sponsoring the 2020 series. And everyone stay safe and have a great week.